Asked me what I was going to speak on. We got talking about prayer and studying. I said, Jerry, I study and I read a whole lot more than I pray. My prayer life is weak compared to what I read and study. And he said, well, let me tell you what a friend said to me one time. He said, which is the most important? For you to talk to God or for God to talk to you? That's right. And that's pretty profound. That's right. And I think it's more important for God to talk to me than for me to talk to him, because I usually make nonsense out of it. But God knows what we need.
Amen.
So I like it when he talks to me. And I tell you, Mike, I've sung the Whisper Sweet Peace to me all day. I can't tell you what a song service does for a preaching service.
God bless you.
And I just praise God and thank him for your discernment.
God bless you. You give the Lord the credit.
And I say the same thing. You know, everything that happened this morning, the Lord showed out. I just happened to be the body that he spoke to. And I thank him and praise him for using me.
I'll tell you something about Mike while we're at it. He had all the songs picked out this morning. And right before he called the choir up, he changed every stinking one of them. All of them. Steve was in a panic, and I'm like, I should go with it.
Just go with the flow.
And God showed out all over
It wasn't a
it.
panic, I was just long distance.
I love it when you just let God have his way. Daniel chapter 1.
We walk with the Lord in the light of his word. What a glory he shed on our way, while we do his good will. He abides with us still. trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey.
I can't get this. Mike, Michaela, Jeannie, Billy, Amanda, come up here. Bless our hearts for this song.
Yes, yes.
Do a good job.
When I was in trouble, the way was dark as night. Jesus was my comfort, He brought me to the light. He took away my sorrow and made my burdens light. He is everything to me. If it wasn't for the Lord, tell me what would I do? What would I do? What would I do? If it wasn't for the Lord, tell me what would I do? He is everything to me. He's water in dry places, He's bread in starving land. He's my rock and shelter, He holds me by the hand. When all the world forsakes me, close by my side He'll stand. He is everything to me. If it wasn't for the Lord, tell me what would I do? What would I do? What would I do? If it wasn't for the Lord, tell me what would I do? He is everything to me. Can you sing that?
Okay.
I should have sang it this morning.
Hey, buddy.
Just suppose God searched through heaven and couldn't find one willing to be the supreme sacrifice that was needed to buy eternal life for you and me. Had it not been for a place called Mount Calvary, and had it not been for the old rugged cross, had it not been for a man called Jesus,
He paid it off.
then forever my soul would be lost. And I'm so glad He was willing to drink His bitter cup. Although He prayed, Father, let it pass from me.
trying to get out preaching. I just, I'm glad that's the direction we
Bless
need to
him,
go
Lord.
at that time. God had a reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
God supplied the need.
He always does.
Amen.
Daniel chapter 1, verse 17. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Here we learn some most common things out of this verse of Scripture. We learn that a common meal can afford a tremendous opportunity to witness.
Amen.
Just a common meal. How many times have you went out to eat with a business person or a friend that's not used to saying the blessing? And I always say when I go out to eat with customers, I say, I hope it won't offend you if I ask the blessing on the food. And I've never got a no yet. It certainly would not offend me. And I probably would turn this on, it'd probably work.
I'd say you're right.
Work better where you were.
I'm absolutely technologically,
Don't feel alone.
stupid. In this verse of Scripture, can you turn me down just a little bit? We learn that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Yeah.
And let no man despise thy youth. That's the 3 things that I draw from this particular verse of Scripture. Even though Daniel was young, he didn't let it bother him. He was not afraid to not defile himself with the king's food and with worshiping idols. He was not going to do that, he and the 3 Hebrew children. Now, like Joseph and Moses, Daniel and his companions received the training in the palace of a king. They were chosen from among the Jewish men that were led captive by Nebuchadnezzar, and they were to learn the language and the literature of the Chaldeans, and they were to stand in the court as counselors. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning. Don't get me wrong. I am all for education. Education is great as long as it doesn't affect your faith in God.
Absolutely.
When education goes from being education to being taking you away from your faith and putting you in a compromising position from your God, then it is bad.
That's right.
And I scan my phone all the time because I read a lot of news on it. And there was this retired professor just wrote a book and come out with how the liberal college professors are changing and the young people of today into being liberal anarchists.
Right.
And it was so true what the man said. He was probably 65, 70 years old, retired professor. And he said the problem's not with the children, the problem is with the professors in our universities that are teaching them all the ways contrary to the ways of God. So the fact that Daniel and his 3 friends underwent a 3-year course tells us that there must have been a palace school or a university, and I brought that out last week. Now, since they would have been fed from the king's table and had the king's wine, this university or school must have been close to the palace, where the food would have been cold. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense that it wouldn't have been close. We also know from the clay libraries of Nineveh and Babylon that have been unearthed that these people, these Chaldeans, were a learned people. They were very educated people. They had made great advances in grammar, in mathematics, in astrology, and in the sciences. All different kinds of sciences. We also must remember that Babylon was the location of the Tower of Babel. Okay? And these people inherited all the skills and the wisdom of the antediluvian people, the people before the flood. And they were very, very smart people, especially in building. They were inventors of musical instruments and skilled workers in the iron. And you'll find that in Genesis chapter 4, verses 20 through 22. Now I'm going to read 18 through 21. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and the astrologers that were in his realm. And Daniel continued even until the first year of King Cyrus. Now, Daniel and them knew that they were not going to go back to their lands for at least 70 years. They understood that, okay? And they had every reason to just go with the lay of the land and be fat and happy. They had every reason just to go with the flow, if you will, and do as the king says and live a happy life. But they weren't built that way. They were raised under the directions of an almighty God. But they chose to live a separated life. And that's a great lesson. They did not conform themselves to their environment. They separated themselves from their environment. And I like where Romans says, be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your spirit.
Yes.
That you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. So, we today have fallen in with the spirit of this present evil age. And that's what we're living in right now. We're living in the present evil age. And at least some of us are living a life of compromise. Now you might say, well, I don't compromise. I beg to differ with you.
Hey, that's a truth.
We all compromise.
Yep.
I don't care who you are, me included. We all compromise at times with the world. Because we don't have the strength to stand up. And when we do that, it makes us powerless and barren. It takes everything away from us because we're compromisers.
Yeah.
Now, let us dare to be a Daniel in these days of Babylonian worldliness that we're living in right now. Let's go to chapter 2. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled and his sleep brake from him. Now, since Nebuchadnezzar did not take the reins of king until 605 BC, remember that he went in and took captive the 4 Hebrew children in 606 BC. His father, Napoleozar, died in 605. He went back and took the kingship. He became the king in 605. This is the second year reign, which means it's 603, which means the children of Israel had been there 3 years. That was the time of the schooling that they were to receive. They were received 3 years of training. And they had already graduated from that school. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been listed with the Chaldeans in verses 13 and 15. So they had already graduated 13 and 18. So, for some reason, Daniel has not been informed of the demand of the king until verses 14 and 15 when Arioch comes to arrest him at his home. He didn't know of the decree. So he may have been on vacation. He may have been on the king's business out somewhere to another province. We're not told. It's mere speculation. But when you read the story, you find out that he was unaware of what the decree was. You would think that if he was 10 times smarter than all the rest of them, that the king would have sent for him first. But he didn't. So we asked ourselves the question, why was Nebuchadnezzar chosen to give the revelation of the end times? Why Nebuchadnezzar? He could have given it to Daniel. He could have given it to Jeremiah. He could have given it to Isaiah. He could have given it to a lot of different prophets. But he didn't. We often read of the divine right of kings. Okay? If there ever was a king who had a divine right, it was Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't assume the right to be the king. It was given it to him by God. Turn your Bibles to Jeremiah chapter 27. Jeremiah chapter 27, verse 4. Let me just start with one. In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, came this word unto Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Thus saith the Lord to me, Make these bonds and yokes, and put them upon thy neck. And send them to the king of Edom, and to the king of Moab, and to the king of the Ammonites, and to the king of Tyrus, and the king of Zidon, by the hand of the messengers which came to Jerusalem to Zedekiah, king of Judah. And here's where we're going to go, 4 to 8. And command them to say unto their masters, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Thus shall ye say unto your masters, I have made the earth, the man, and the beast that are upon the ground, and by my great power, and by my outstretched arm, and have given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant. Was he a lost man? Absolutely was. Did God use him? Absolutely did.
Yep.
And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all nations shall serve him, and his son and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. In other words, until the time that the Medes and the Persians come over and take over. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. And it shall come to pass that the nation and kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword and with the famine and with the pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. He had a divine right as king because God put it there.
Yes.
He gave it to him. He appointed him to be the king. Now, we don't know, however, we do know, however, that he was greatly puffed up. And he had a really good high opinion of himself. In chapter 4 of Daniel, verses 29 and 30, we read this. As he walked into the palace one day, he exclaimed, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by my might and by my power and for the honor of my majesty? So it seems proper that God would give this revelation to the man that thought he was as good as God, or better, to show him that he's going to be put down. So it's very fitting that he finds out that his greatness is not as great as he thinks it was. That it was not the result of his ability apart from God God put him in the position.
Yes.
And that the glories, he's going to learn from the interpretation that the glories of his empire will pass. They will be gone, destroyed. So one day he's laying on his couch in his palace, and he sees in his dream a great image. The Word of God says that whose brightness was excellent. Now, when you think about that, you met this great image, and next week I'm going to bring you a chart, which I think you're going to enjoy, of this great image. And by the way, let me throw this in there. I think it was Tuesday night. Boyd Bingham came on Channel 44, and he was standing here, and his son, who I didn't know was his son, was standing here, and behind them was all of these charts on Daniel. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Revelations. And they had a discussion on the book of Daniel that was as good as I've ever heard. If you have an opportunity, you can go and get that CD or DVD, and it's going to continue. I would recommend it because it was a tremendous, tremendous teaching service. But anyway, it says its brightness was excellent. That's because the head was of gold and the breast was silver. It was, down here was brass. It was all shining metals. And the image was humongous. When we get there, we'll find out how big it was. It was humongous. It just about filled the whole plain. And it says, and the form thereof was terrible. It scared Nebuchadnezzar to death. He was terrified. The dream was so bad that he awoke in terror. He was troubled, perplexed, and before he could collect himself, he forgot the dream. Now, I don't know about you, but I've dreamed many a dream in my day, and I probably can't remember two of them.
Yeah.
Because you forget them.
Yeah.
Actually, the books that I'm reading saying that the dreams are in your awaking stage. You dream right before you awake. Now, it said if the dream is so vivid that you might carry it for a day or two. But most of the time, you forget it before you ever wake up. Now, I had a dream about Linda one time, and I woke up and I was madder than a wet hen. I mean, it was awful. I just thought that dream was real. But that's very seldom ever happened to me. You know, normally I don't even dream much. So the dream was bad. Now let's go to verse 2. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. So Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. It scared him to death. He pretty much immediately forgot the dream, but it bothered him so bad. He wanted to know what the dream was. He wanted these men that know gods, these magicians, and by the way, a magician is one who practiced magic. They were superstitious rites and ceremonies used by fortune tellers. The sorcerers, the astrologers, were men pretending to tell the future events by the study of the stars. Now, in the old days, that was very prevalent.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still people today that plant their gardens by the stars and by the moon and the seasons. So it was very, very prevalent. The sorcerers were those who pretended to hold communications with the dead. They used potions and claimed to possess supernatural power gained through the aid of evil spirits. They could talk to other gods. Okay? Now the Chaldeans were a group of philosophers who made the sciences their special study, and it was this group that Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children were part of. Now, let's go to verse 4. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, which is Syrian, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. They said, hey, Dad, we're really smart. You just tell us the dream, and we'll tell you the interpretation of it. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill.
Triple.
He didn't mince any words. He said, you're supposed to be communicating with God, and you can communicate with evil spirits, and you know what the stars say, and the moon says, and all of this. You tell me what I dreamed. Either that or you're imposters. That's basically what he was saying. So, verse 5, the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. He said, you're just killing time. You're hoping that I forget about it. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me. He said, you're all false. You're all imposters. You said you can do this, you can interpret dreams, you can do all this, and you can't even tell me what I dreamed, let alone tell me the interpretation of it. So you're all imposters. He said, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. Now, the ancient fortune tellers, and every time I say that word, I think of Bobby Drennan. You walk down the street in certain cities and you see these signs out there with a fortune teller, this lady with a turban on, and scares me to death. I wouldn't walk in there for all the tea in China, because I know it's not of God. But they were very good in the art of drawing sufficient information from the person that wanted to know something, enough that they could take any circumstance and make it work, if they could get enough information from it. It's kind of what a lawyer does. You sit down with a lawyer and he's going to ask you 1,000 questions so he can shape it and form it the way that he wants it to sound. Okay? And especially if you're trying to hire him for a case. He's going to tell you, oh, you can do this and you can do that, and then you get in the courtroom and you can't do none of it. So all these men thought that if the king would tell them the dream, they'd put their heads together and come up with a solution, with an answer that the king would accept. But they were supposed to have supernatural powers and could communicate with spirits, and they didn't have anything. They were blank. They drew a blank. So the king loses his patience and says, look, you must be imposters. You're sparring for time, and until the time be changed. That is the thing that you're waiting for, the memory to be gone in the past, so that I'll forget that I even asked you what the interpretation of the dream was, or what the dream was. You're just sparring for time. You're trying to kill time. So you must be imposters. Now, 10 and 11. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asketh such things of any magician or astrologer or Chaldean, and it is rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, who dwelleth is not with flesh. Whose dwelleth is not with flesh. Now, this is the Chaldeans claiming that the only person that can interpret these dreams is the gods. This is the same Chaldeans that say they have the power to know what the other gods are thinking. So they just made themselves liars, right by themselves. So the king loses his patience again and tells them, hey, you all are not who you say you are. You said you could do this and you could do that, and you can't do any of it. They were saying, these Chaldeans, that they had no power with the gods to know what the dream was or the interpretation of the dream. Verses 12 and 13. For this cause, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. These were the wealthy, educated, cultivated people of the Babylonian Empire. So if all of them are slain, it's going to tremendously hurt the Babylonian Empire. But God was in control. And God says, no, not going to let that happen. Even though there's sorcerers and magicians and Chaldeans and astrologers and all the rest, not going to let you kill them all, because I've got a Hebrew there that can interpret dreams. When the magicians and the wise men of Egypt could not interpret Pharaoh's dreams, God had a captive, a Hebrew, by the name of Joseph, prepared for the task. When the magicians and the wise men of Babylon and the Chaldeans and the astrologers could not interpret the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar, God had a captive Hebrew boy, Daniel, that was up to the task.
Yep.
God always provides a man.
Amen.
The question is, why was Daniel not one of the first to be consulted? And we're not told. I don't know. But it appears, according to this verse, he knew nothing of the decree from the king until Arioch come to get him to arrest him. So 14, 15, 16. I'm going to end right there tonight. 14, 15, 16. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then, now get this, you say, how do you know that Daniel didn't know? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Daniel didn't know. So Arioch tells him, here's the decree, here's what happened. And Daniel says, why is he in such a haste? Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. Now, notice the difference between Daniel and the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the sorcerers. Daniel didn't go in and say, what did you dream? Daniel went in and said, just give me a little time and I'll come back and I'll show you the dream and the interpretation thereof. Because Daniel had faith that God would give it to him.
Amen.
Now next week, we get to pick up on the great all-night prayer meeting. And it's a wonderful prayer meeting. From starting next week, it just really gets good because we get down into the meat. We get into the dream, what the beast stands for. There's only 4 known world kingdoms, even to this day. Russia's not a world power. The United States is not a world power. China's not a world power. Japan's not a world power. They were the world power of the known world. Now, that doesn't say that there were not places in North America, or South America, that was not under Nebuchadnezzar's rule because they hadn't been found yet. But there were people there, they just hadn't been discovered. It was the known world. So only 4. Next week we'll get into those 4, and we'll explain what the 4th one, who it is, and when it's going to be revived. So I hope you're enjoying this. I'm trying to take it as slow as I can and not make it tedious or something that you can't understand. I'm trying to take it slow and explain it as I go, because it gets really, really good and it gets right up to date. You know, it's amazing. Carolyn said she was coming in today and she was listening to a preacher preach on Daniel. And I've heard more preaching on Daniel in the last couple of weeks than I've heard in the last 5 years. And I'm pretty sure it's because of the times that we're living in.
Yeah.
I think it's close. I really do. Mike, come and get a song. We got a special treat tonight you're going to enjoy.